The desperate plea. The observation deck of Harmony Station buzzed with its usual activity when the unmarked ship appeared on the sensors. Captain Marcus Reed set down his coffee and watched the sleek vessel approach through the viewport. Its design was unlike anything in the human fleet. Curves were humans' preferred angles, organic flowing lines that seemed almost alive. "Captain, we're receiving a transmission," Lieutenant Torres announced from the communication station. "It's unusual, sir. The language patterns don't match any known alien dialects in our database." Marcus straightened his uniform jacket. "Put it through the universal translator and patch it to the main viewer." The screen flickered to life, revealing a figure that made several crew members gasp. She stood tall and proud despite the exhaustion written across her features. Her skin held an ethereal blue tint that seemed to shimmer under the ship's lighting. Silver hair cascaded past her shoulders, and her eyes, a striking violet, held depths of pain that Marcus recognized from his own mirror during the war years. "I am Commander Zara Nightfall of the Kytherian Defense Corps," she began, her voice carrying a musical quality that the translator couldn't quite capture. "I come before you, not as an enemy or conqueror, but as a mother watching her children die. My people face extinction, and we have nowhere else to turn." The bridge fell silent except for the steady hum of the station's systems. Marcus found himself leaning forward, drawn by something in her voice that went beyond mere words. Here was a warrior brought to her knees by circumstances beyond her control. "My world, Kytheris Prime, has been consumed by what we call the Void Plague. It spreads through our cities like darkness itself, consuming all organic matter it touches. Our greatest scientists, our most powerful weapons, nothing has slowed its advance. In 3 cycles, maybe 4, there will be nothing left of my people but empty cities and silent graves." Marcus felt his chest tighten. He'd seen worlds die before, watched civilizations crumble under the weight of war and disease, but something about this woman's plea cut deeper than professional sympathy. "We monitored your communications, studied your species from afar. Humans possess something we lack: adaptability in the face of impossible odds. Your histories speak of plagues conquered, of species saved from extinction through pure determination and ingenuity." She paused, and Marcus saw her hands trembling slightly at her sides. The proud warrior facade cracked just enough to reveal the desperate mother beneath. "I have spent the last 10 cycles traveling between star systems, pleading with every advanced species we've encountered. The Zorith Collective called us contaminated and refused to allow our ships near their borders. The crystal minds of Nexus Prime calculated our extinction as statistically inevitable and dismissed our request for aid. The High Council of Drakmor," her voice broke slightly, "they offered to purchase our children as curiosities before the plague claimed them." Marcus's jaw clenched. He dealt with enough alien species to know that many viewed other civilizations as expendable, but the casual cruelty still shocked him. "You are our last hope," Zara said, her violet eyes finding his through the screen. "I do not come offering wealth or territory in exchange for aid. My people are dying, and I have nothing left to bargain with, except my own life and the lives of the few survivors I've managed to evacuate." The communication ended, leaving the bridge in stunned silence. Marcus stared at the blank screen, his mind racing. He turned to face his crew, seeing doubt and concern written across their faces. "Sir," Commander Phillips spoke up from the tactical station, "we need to consider the risks. An unknown plague that consumes organic matter, if it's transmissible to human biology." "I understand the concerns," Marcus replied, but his eyes remained fixed on the viewport where Zara's ship waited. Something about her desperation resonated with memories he'd tried to bury, his own sister's face when the doctors told them there was nothing more they could do. "Captain Reed," the communications officer called out, "Admiral Harrison is requesting immediate contact from Earth Command. They've been monitoring the transmission." Marcus nodded grimly. He knew what Earth Command would say. Too risky, too expensive, not their problem. But as he looked out at that alien ship holding the last remnants of a dying civilization, he realized he couldn't live with himself if he just turned away. "Tell Admiral Harrison I'll contact him shortly," Marcus said, moving toward the airlock controls. "First, I want to speak with Commander Nightfall in person." The crew exchanged worried glances, but Marcus had made his decision. Sometimes the right choice wasn't the safe one, and something told him that this violet-eyed warrior from a dying world was about to change his life forever.
The unlikely alliance. The airlock cycled open with a soft hiss, and Marcus found himself face to face with Commander Zariah Nightfall. In person, she was even more striking than on the view screen. She moved with the fluid grace of a trained warrior, but her violet eyes held a weariness that spoke of sleepless nights and impossible burdens. "Captain Reed," she said, offering a formal bow that seemed natural to her species, "I thank you for agreeing to meet with me directly. Many of your kind have refused even this courtesy." Marcus gestured toward the station's diplomatic quarters. "Let's talk somewhere more private. I imagine you've been carrying this weight alone for too long." As they walked through the corridors, Marcus noticed how other humans stared at Zara with a mixture of curiosity and apprehension. She seemed to shrink slightly under their gazes, her proud shoulders pulling inward defensively. "They fear me," she observed quietly. "I have grown accustomed to it during my travels." "They fear what they don't understand," Marcus replied, stopping at a secure conference room. "Fear fades with familiarity. Trust me, I've seen it happen." Inside the private chamber, Zara's composure finally began to crack. She sank into a chair with an exhausted sigh, her warrior's mask slipping away to reveal the frightened woman beneath. "Tell me about your people," Marcus said gently, settling across from her with 2 cups of tea. "Not the tactical briefing. Tell me about who they are." Zara's eyes softened as she spoke of Kythera's Prime. She described cities that grew like gardens, architecture that flowed with the natural landscape rather than conquering it. Her people were artists and philosophers as much as they were warriors, creating beauty even in the face of constant territorial disputes with neighboring systems. "My daughter, Nira, was to be bonded next season," Zara whispered, her hands trembling around the warm cup. She had chosen a mate from the scholar caste, a gentle soul who wrote poetry about the way starlight danced through our crystal forests. Now she lies in stasis, along with 300 other survivors, while I chase impossible hopes across the galaxy. Marcus felt something tighten in his chest. The pain in her voice was achingly familiar. "How old is she?" "In your years, perhaps 22 cycles, still young enough to dream of a future, old enough to understand that future may never come." Zara met his eyes, and Marcus saw the desperate mother behind the commander's facade. "I watch her sleep in that cold pod, and wonder if I am prolonging her suffering or preserving her hope." "You're fighting for her," Marcus said firmly. "That's what parents do." Something shifted in Zara's expression. The walls she'd built around herself seemed to lower, allowing him to see the person behind the title. "You speak as someone who understands loss." Marcus nodded slowly. "My sister died in the Proxima Colony plague outbreak 10 years ago. I was commanding a medical relief ship, arrived 3 days too late. I've been telling myself ever since that there wasn't anything more I could have done, but the guilt remains." Zara finished softly. The voice that whispers, "You should have tried harder, moved faster, been better." Their eyes met across the small table, and Marcus felt an unexpected connection spark between them. Here was someone who understood the weight of responsibility, the crushing burden of holding lives in your hands and watching them slip away. "I want to help you," Marcus said, the words coming from somewhere deeper than professional duty. But I need to know everything: the plague's progression, its origin, what countermeasures you've already attempted. Zara straightened, her commander persona returning, but now tempered with something warmer. The plague appears to be artificial in origin. It targets specific genetic markers unique to Kytherian physiology, but its behavior suggests intelligence. It adapts to each countermeasure we deploy. Bioweapon? Marcus asked grimly. That is our fear. We have enemies who would celebrate our extinction, but none with this level of biotechnological sophistication. Zara activated a holographic display from her wrist device, showing the progression of the plague across her world. It began in our capital city and spread outward in perfect concentric circles, too precise to be natural. Marcus studied the data, his mind already working through possibilities. You said it targets Kytherian genetics specifically. Have you tested it against other organic compounds? Plants, animals, other alien species? Limited testing showed no effect on non-Kytherian life forms, but we lacked the resources for comprehensive study before evacuation became necessary. Then that's our starting point, Marcus said, standing with new determination. We run comparative analyses, break down the plague's targeting mechanism. If it's designed specifically for your people, there might be a way to fool it or redirect it. Zara rose as well, hope flickering in her violet eyes. You truly mean to help us, despite the risks to yourself and your people? Marcus moved closer, drawn by the vulnerability she was trying so hard to hide. Sometimes the greatest risk is doing nothing at all. Besides, he added with a slight smile, humans have a reputation for being too stubborn to know when we're beaten. For the first time since their meeting began, Zara smiled, a genuine expression that transformed her entire face. I have heard this about your species. It is reassuring. Their hands brushed as she reached for the datapad, and Marcus felt an electric jolt that had nothing to do with static charge. Zara's eyes widened slightly, suggesting she felt it too. We should contact my crew, Marcus said, though he made no move to step away. Begin preparations for departure to your system. Captain, Zara said softly, Marcus, I cannot promise this mission will not end in both our deaths. He met her gaze steadily, seeing past the warrior's warning to the woman's fear. Then we'd better make sure it doesn't. Your daughter deserves to see her crystal forests again.
Hearts in the darkness. The journey to the Kytheris system took 8 days through hyperspace. Marcus found himself spending more time in the ship's laboratory with Zara than was strictly necessary, ostensibly reviewing plague data but increasingly drawn by her presence. She moved with unconscious grace even in the cramped research bay, her silver hair catching the artificial light as she worked. Your analysis of the genetic markers is brilliant, Zara said, leaning over his shoulder to examine the computer display. Her proximity sent warmth through Marcus's chest that had nothing to do with the ship's environmental controls. Our scientists never considered targeting the protein synthesis pathways. Sometimes an outside perspective helps, Marcus replied, acutely aware of her breath against his ear. We humans have a talent for unconventional thinking. Their fingers brushed as they both reached for the same data crystal, and this time neither pulled away immediately. Marcus turned in his chair to face her, finding her violet eyes much closer than expected. Zara, he began, but she stepped back quickly, her professional mask sliding into place. We should focus on the research, she said, though her voice carried an undertone that suggested she was fighting the same attraction he felt. When they dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of the Kytheris system, the sight that greeted them stole the breath from Marcus's lungs. Kytheris Prime hung before them like a dying jewel, its once brilliant blue surface now mottled with spreading patches of absolute black. The plague had consumed roughly 70% of the planet's surface. My home, Zara whispered, her hand pressed against the viewport. Tears traced silver lines down her cheeks as she watched her world die. Marcus stood behind her, fighting the urge to wrap his arms around her shoulders. We're going to find a way to stop this. The orbital stations are gone, she noted, her voice hollow. The emergency evacuation centers, the research facilities, all consumed.
Our ship's sensors detected massive energy readings from the planet's surface. The plague wasn't just destroying organic matter, it was somehow feeding off the consumption, growing stronger with each life it claimed. We'll need to establish a base camp on one of the outer moons, Marcus decided. Somewhere with enough distance to study the plague safely while maintaining mobility. Zara nodded, but her gaze remained fixed on her dying world. The third moon has adequate facilities. We used it for military training exercises. The moon's surface was stark and beautiful in its own way. Crystalline formations that caught and reflected the system's binary starlight in spectacular displays. The abandoned military facility provided adequate shelter and laboratory space, though the isolation felt oppressive after the bustle of Harmony Station. That first night, Marcus found Zara standing alone on the facility's observation deck, staring out at Kytharis Prime. The planet's diseased surface cast an eerie shadow across her features. "I keep thinking I should be able to see the cities from here," she said without turning around. "Irrational, of course. The distance is too great. But I remember as a child believing I could see the lights of home from anywhere in the system." Marcus joined her at the railing, careful to maintain some distance, though every instinct urged him closer. "Tell me about those cities, before the plague." Zara's expression softened as she described the crystal spires that grew like living things, architectural marvels that seemed to breathe with the planet's natural rhythms. She spoke of markets filled with music and laughter, of artists who sculpted with light itself, of the great academies where her people studied the mysteries of the universe. "Nera wanted to be a xenobiologist," she said with a sad smile. She was fascinated by the diversity of life, the infinite ways consciousness could manifest. She would have loved to meet humans under different circumstances. "We still might," Marcus said firmly. "We're going to save your people, Zara. All of them." She turned to face him then, and Marcus saw something shift in her violet eyes. The careful distance she'd been maintaining seemed to crumble, leaving only raw emotion. "You have such faith," she whispered. "Even facing the impossible, you believe in hope." "Someone once told me that hope is just stubbornness wearing a prettier dress, and humans excel at both." Zara laughed, a sound like crystal chimes that made Marcus's heart race. "Your species is remarkable. No wonder the galaxy fears you." "They fear us because we don't know when to quit. Because we look at impossible odds and see them as interesting puzzles to solve." "And what do you see when you look at me?" she asked softly, her voice barely above a whisper. "I see someone who's been carrying the weight of an entire civilization alone. I see strength that refuses to break even when it should, and I see—" He hesitated, knowing that crossing this line would change everything. "What?" she pressed, moving closer until she could see flecks of silver in her violet irises. "The most remarkable woman I've ever met," he admitted, "human or otherwise." The space between them disappeared as Zara stepped forward, her hands coming up to rest against his chest. "Marcus, this is not wise. My people, my duty." "Your duty is to save your people," Marcus said gently, his hand settling at her waist. "But you're still a person, Zara. You're allowed to want something for yourself." She looked up at him with eyes full of conflict and longing. "If we fail, if the plague cannot be stopped, then this feeling between us will only make the ending more painful. And if we succeed, imagine how much more meaningful that success becomes." Zara's resolution finally cracked. She rose on her toes and kissed him, tentatively at first, then with growing passion as he responded. Her lips tasted of starlight and hope, and Marcus felt something fundamental shift in his chest, a recognition that this woman had become essential to his existence. They broke apart, breathing heavily, foreheads touching as they held each other in the observation deck's dim light. "This complicates everything," she whispered against his lips. "The best things usually do," Marcus replied, pulling her closer. Outside, the stars wheeled overhead while Kytheris Prime continued its silent death spiral. But for this moment, in each other's arms, they found something worth fighting for beyond duty or obligation.
The final stand. The breakthrough came during their 5th day on the moon, when Marcus noticed an anomaly in the plague's genetic structure that had escaped previous analysis. Working side by side in the cramped laboratory, he and Zara barely slept as they pursued the discovery. "Look at this sequence," Marcus said excitedly, pointing to the holographic display. "The plague isn't just targeting Kytherian genetics, it's specifically designed to target royal bloodlines." Zara leaned closer, her violet eyes widening as she processed the implications. "The genetic markers, they match the royal family's DNA signature. But how could anyone have obtained such specific biological data?" "Inside job," Marcus said grimly. "Someone with access to your most classified genetic records created this weapon." Zara's face went pale. "The High Geneticist Council. They have complete records of all noble bloodlines for hereditary tracking, but they're among our most trusted advisors." "People can be bought, threatened, or replaced," Marcus said gently, seeing the betrayal hit her like a physical blow. "What matters now is that we know how to fight it." Their research had revealed that the plague's targeting mechanism could be confused by introducing synthetic genetic markers that mimicked royal DNA, but contained subtle flaws. It was like giving the weapon false targets to attack, while the real population remained protected. "We need to synthesize enough countervirus to treat the entire planet," Zara said, already calculating the requirements. "The production facilities on the second moon could handle that volume, but they're within the plague's expansion radius," Marcus finished. "We'd have to get there, start production, and complete synthesis before the plague reaches the moon." Zara nodded soberly. "A window of perhaps 18 hours. And if we fail, if the plague consumes the production facility, then we lose our only chance to save your people, not to mention ourselves." They stared at each other across the laboratory, both understanding the enormous risk they were contemplating. Success meant salvation for an entire species. Failure meant certain death for everyone involved. "There's something else," Zara said quietly. "The stasis pods holding my people, they're programmed to open automatically if my vital signs flatline, a safeguard to prevent them from sleeping forever if something happens to me." Marcus felt ice form in his stomach. "Meaning, if you die during this mission, 300 survivors wake up to face the plague with no protection and no hope," she finished. "My death becomes theirs as well." The weight of that responsibility settled between them like a physical presence. Marcus reached for her hand, intertwining their fingers. "Then we don't die," he said simply. "We go to that moon, we synthesize the cure, and we save everyone, including each other." Zara squeezed his hand tightly. "The odds against success are irrelevant," Marcus interrupted. "I learned something during the war, Zara. Humans don't beat impossible odds through superior planning or better weapons. We win by refusing to accept defeat even when every logical analysis says we should." She lifted their joined hands to her lips, pressing a soft kiss to his knuckles. "Then let us be magnificently illogical together." The flight to the second moon took them dangerously close to Kytheria's Prime's infected surface. Their ship's sensors screamed warnings as they detected the plague's expanding boundary, a wall of consuming darkness that devoured everything in its path. 12 hours until it reaches the production facility," Zara announced tensely from the pilot seat. "We'll have to work faster than any synthesis protocol has ever been attempted." Marcus checked their supply inventory one final time. "We have enough raw materials for approximately 60% planet-wide coverage. It'll have to be enough." The production facility was a marvel of Kytherian engineering, all flowing lines and organic curves that seemed to grow from the moon's crystalline surface. Inside, automated systems hummed to life at Zara's command, beginning the complex process of countervirus synthesis. As the hours passed, Marcus and Zara worked with desperate efficiency, monitoring dozens of parallel synthesis streams while making countless micro-adjustments to optimize the process. Their hands often brushed as they reached for the same controls, and Marcus found himself stealing glances at her focused profile. "Marcus," she said, suddenly, not looking up from her console, "if we don't survive this, we will," he said firmly. "But if we don't," she continued, "I want you to know that these past weeks with you have been the happiest of my life. Even facing extinction, even watching my world die, you made me remember what it felt like to hope." Marcus stopped working and turned to face her fully. "Zara, look at me." She met his eyes, and he saw tears threatening to spill over. "We're going to make it," he said, moving to cup her face in his hands. "We're going to save your people, cure your world, and then we're going to have a very long conversation about what happens next." "What if the cure doesn't work?" she whispered. "Then we'll find another way, and another after that. I'm not giving up on you, on us, or on your people. That's not who I am." Zara kissed him then, fierce and desperate and full of love that transcended species. When they broke apart, alarms began blaring throughout the facility. "Synthesis complete," the automated system announced. "Countervirus ready for deployment." Through the facility's transparent dome, they could see the plague's boundary approaching like a tide of absolute darkness. They had minutes, maybe less. "Launch sequence initiated," Zara called out, her fingers dancing across the control surface. "Atmospheric dispersion in 3, 2, 1, deploy!" Thousands of delivery pods launched simultaneously from the moon's surface, streaking towards Kytherius Prime like falling stars, carrying hope instead of destruction. Marcus and Zara watched breathlessly as the first pods reached the planet's atmosphere and began releasing their precious cargo. The effect was almost immediate. Where the countervirus met the plague's advancing edge, the consuming darkness stopped, wavered, and began to retreat. Slowly at first, then with increasing speed, the black stain on Kytheria's prime surface started to shrink. "It's working," Zara breathed, gripping Marcus's hand so tightly her nails drew blood. "By the ancestors, it's actually working!" They held each other as they watched her world heal, the blue-green surface of Kytheria's prime gradually returning as the plague died. The crystal cities began to gleam again in the starlight, and Marcus could swear he saw lights beginning to flicker in the urban centers. "Your people will wake up to a clean world," Marcus said softly, pulling Zara against his chest. "Your daughter will see those crystal forests again." Zara sobbed with relief and joy, all her careful composure finally shattered by the magnitude of their success. Marcus held her as she cried, stroking her silver hair and whispering promises of the future they'd just made possible.
A new beginning. 6 months later, Alina stood on the observation deck of New Zephiria's medical center, watching the twin suns of Kepler 442b paint the horizon in shades of amber and rose. The settlement sprawled below in organic curves that seemed to grow from the landscape itself, a testament to Zephirian biotechnology and human engineering working in harmony. Her hands moved instinctively to the subtle changes in her body, the biomodifications that allowed her to better serve the integrated colony's diverse population. Kira had designed them personally, her touch both professional and intimate, as she'd explained how the neural interfaces would enhance Alina's ability to treat both species. "The new medical facility is ready for tomorrow's dedication," Kira said, joining Alina at the window. Her mobility had improved dramatically with new prosthetics that blended human durability with Zephirian bioresponsiveness. "The Council is calling it the Elena Vazquez Center for Interspecies Medicine." Alina turned to embrace her partner, still marveling at how naturally they'd learned to communicate across species lines. "It should be the Phelan Vazquez Center. You designed half the technology." "You provided the heart," Kira replied, her English now flawless, though she retained the musical accent Alina loved. "Besides, I have other projects to focus on." Before Alina could ask what she meant, familiar voices echoed from the entrance. Alina's parents, Dr. Maria Vasquez and Professor Carlos Vasquez, emerged onto the deck with Nix and two other Zephyrians Alina didn't recognize. "Mija!" her mother called, embracing Alina warmly. "This place is incredible. Your father hasn't stopped asking questions about the bioengineering processes since we arrived." Alina's father, a materials scientist, was deep in conversation with one of Nix's companions about the molecular structure of the settlement's living architecture. His enthusiasm reminded Alina why she'd inherited her own passion for discovery. "Your parents are remarkable. They've adapted to our culture with amazing grace. Your father has already proposed 3 collaborative research projects." Alina felt a familiar tightness in her throat. The past 6 months haven't been without challenges. The integration program required participants from both species to undergo genetic compatibility treatments, cultural immersion periods, and psychological evaluations. Some humans had chosen to return to Earth. Several Zephyrians had struggled with human emotional expressions. But Elena and Kira had thrived, their initial connection deepening into something that transcended species boundaries. They'd become the program's most successful pairing, serving as ambassadors for what interspecies relationships could achieve. "There is something we need to tell you," Kira said, taking Elena's hand with the gesture that had become their signature communication method. "The Council has approved a new phase of the integration program." Nix stepped forward with a smile. "Elena, your success here has convinced the Council to establish similar settlements in 5 other systems. We need experienced couples to lead the medical and engineering teams for each location." Elena's mother gasped. "You're expanding? Creating more colonies like this?" "With Elena and Kira as senior coordinators, if they're willing to accept the assignment. It would mean years of travel, establishing new settlements, training new integration pairs." Elena looked at Kira, seeing excitement and uncertainty warring in her expressions. They'd found happiness here, built a life together. Leaving meant starting over repeatedly, facing new challenges with each settlement. "What do you think?" Elena asked softly. Kira smiled, the expression lighting up her entire face. "I think the galaxy is full of people who need what we found here: healing, hope, the chance to build something better together." Elena's father approached, having extracted himself from his technical discussion. "Mija, I need to tell you something. When you first announced you're staying with the Zephyrians, your mother and I were terrified. We thought we'd lost you to something we couldn't understand." He paused, looking out at the settlement below. "But seeing you now, seeing what you and Kira have built together, what this whole colony represents, you haven't lost yourself to an alien culture. You found the best version of yourself by opening your heart to something beyond our limited human perspective." Elena felt tears pricking her eyes as her mother nodded agreement. "We're proud of you, Elena, both of you." That evening, Elena and Kira stood together on their private balcony, watching the settlement's bioluminescent lighting system create patterns that responded to the emotional resonance of its inhabitants. The entire colony glowed with warm, contented hues. "Are you ready for another adventure?" Kira asked, her arm around Elena's waist. Elena leaned into her partner's warmth, thinking about all they'd overcome and all they'd yet to discover. "With you, I'm ready for anything the universe wants to throw at us." Kira turned Elena to face her, their foreheads touching in the gesture that had become their most sacred connection. "Thalenara, forever my bridge between worlds." "Forever," Elena agreed, sealing the promise with a kiss that tasted of alien stars and infinite possibilities. Above them, the twin suns set on one world, while rising on countless others, each holding the potential for love to bloom across any distance, any difference, any barrier the universe might place between two hearts meant to find each other.